Okay. Uh, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who has joined us for the session today live or are watching this session recording later. This is Salesforce Marketing Cloud Bootcamp, and today's topic is Automation Studio. In fact, this is day 2 of Automation Studio. We started the Automation Studio topic yesterday. Here is the agenda, which is spread across day 1 and day 2. So yesterday we covered what is Automation Studio, a walkthrough of the Automation Studio interface, automation workflow, automation starting sources, file locations, how to run an automation, and different Automation Studio activities. Today, we are going to continue from the Automation Studio activities section, the remaining activities that we did not cover yesterday, and then we'll try to complete the session today. So yeah, these are the slides that were covered in yesterday's session. Okay. I believe data extract activity was also covered in yesterday's session, but if in case somebody wants a quick revision, so data extract activity, we saw this being used in the file transfer or a data transfer demo example that we saw yesterday. And data extract activity can be used to extract data from data extension and upload the file to SFMC house. So data can be extracted in CSV format, zip format, and along with that, we can also use this activity data extract to extract tracking data. Tracking data is email, opens, bounce, click, sends, and all those things. So all that tracking data which is available under Email Studio as well is a tracking report. You can configure an automation to extract that tracking data in an automated fashion. Similarly, if you have enabled the audit trail feature, which has 2 versions, basic and advanced, if you have enabled that feature in your Marketing Cloud account, then you can also use Automation Studio or data extract activity to get that audit trail data. Okay, now filter activity. So filter activity, as the name suggests, it's used to filter data from a data extension or a list into a target data extension or a list based on some data filter, based on some criteria. And if you run this filter activity in an automated fashion, for example, if it runs over a schedule like daily, hourly, weekly, and so on, then every time this activity runs, it will filter the source data and overwrite the data in the filtered data into the target data extension or a list. Right. So let me go to the Marketing Cloud interface. So yeah, like filtered data extension. Okay, so I have this data extension that we used for the automation journey builder session. So this is a welcome users data extension. It has got 7 records. Now a use case here or a scenario here could be that, let's say if I want to filter this data based on language preference. Let's say I want to filter the welcome users data extension and get only those users, those subscribers for whom language preference is S, as in Spanish, right? So there are certain users whose language preference is English, remaining language preference is S. Let's say I want to create a data extension that has only Spanish users record. So this is an example here, but an actual use case or an actual example where you would want to use this scenario could be like you have a subscriber data, you have transaction data, you have other data in your data extensions, and you want to filter that data and get a subset of a data that uh, has specific criteria. For example, field 1 equals to so and field 2 equals to so and so, or it could be some sort of a numerical comparison. For example, if transaction revenue greater than 100 or greater than 1,000 and so on, right? So filtered data extension, if you want to create, so you can use filter activity. So I will create a new automation and call it demo day 2, right? I will use filter activity and set the starting point as schedule, because I just want to run this automation once for now. So I can use schedule option. Right now, I will go and configure a new filter activity. Okay, before that, yeah, I need to configure a data filter. How do I do that? Yeah, I can go to data filters option here under email studio and create a new data filter. So it'll ask me whether you want to create the data filter based on a profile attribute for a list, or you want to create a data filter for a data extension. So in this case, I'm selecting the data extension option. Then I will select my source data extension, welcome users. Then next step, I will configure the filter criteria. So I'll say language preference is equal to S. Right, then it'll ask me to give a name. So I'll say language preference Spanish, and I will save it. So I have created a data filter, which I'll be using here in the filter activity. So I will go create a new filter activity, call it welcome users Spanish, and I'll select the data filter that we just created, language preference Spanish. Right. Okay. Now here it asks us to provide the name of the resulting data extension. So whatever target data extension that will store the filtered data, we need to provide the name of this data extension. So we can say welcome users Spanish language only, right? So in this case, if this destination data extension is not created already, then this filter activity will create this data extension. I'll click on next, finish, save this. So we just verify. Okay. Let me try running this. Meanwhile, we'll see other activities. Okay, the next activity is query activity. So query activity will be used whenever you want to use, whenever you can use a SQL query to process data from your data extensions or from the data views. Now, there is a separate session on using SQL query or using data views, which is part of this bootcamp series. So I won't go into this SQL and queries into detail. But yeah, on a high level for your understanding, you can use query activity when you want to join data from multiple data extensions, multiple data views using a SQL query. And the output from this SQL query activity will then go to a target data extension. Now, you can say that this is somewhat similar to filter activity because filter activity is like a subset. You have data in a single data extension, you want to filter that and create a target data extension. In this case, query activity has got extra powers, like it can combine data from multiple data extensions. But if the use case is use a single source data extension and filter that using SQL query and store the data in a target data extension, store the filter data in the target data extension, then we can say that both filter activity and query activity can be used. Only the difference is here you don't have to write a SQL query, here you have to write a SQL query. Another difference, filter activity can create the target data extension if it is not created already. Whereas in case of query activity, you need to create the target data extension beforehand. So let's go back. Okay, so our filter activity has run. Let's go back and see if the data extension is created. Yes, it's created. Welcome users, Spanish language only, and it has got 3 records. And if we go inside, we should see language preference S. So out of those 7 users, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it has given us 2, 5, and 6. Right. So this is the output from the filter query. Now, similarly, if I want to do the same thing using a SQL query, what I can do is filter Spanish users. I can give a name, click next, and here I can write a query. Select star from, and I'll say this is the data extension on which I want to run the query. I can test the query. So those of you who are still new to this SQL and SQL query and writing SQL queries, I'm not going into the details once again. As I mentioned, there is a dedicated session for SQL and data views. So I hope it will be covered in detail in that session. Right, but those of you who know SQL already, this is nothing but a simple select star query from welcome users where language. Yeah, so if I don't know the name of the field, I can click yes, language preference equals to yes, right? Validate syntax just to check if the syntax is fine. Next, and then it'll ask me to select the target data extension, right? So this is the difference. Filter activity just ask the name. Here it asks me to select the target data extension. So in that case, yeah, I have to create a new data extension. So I'd already created this data extension. So maybe we can use that same data extension, test welcome S for Spanish. And then you have 3 options: data action, append, update, override. So what these options do is if you select append, then whatever is the output from this query, that will just be appended to this data. So right now you can see that this data extension already has 3 records. So if you select append, whatever is the output from the current query, that will be appended into this data extension. So you will have existing 3 records plus the new set of 3 records. If you select update, what it will do is it will update, it will try to find if there are any existing records in this data extension that match with the primary key. So for update, it will check the primary key field. So if there are any subscriber key that are already existing in this data extension, then it will update. And overwrite is simply replace or overwrite the current data in your target data extension. So the 3 records that are already present, those will be deleted and will be overwritten with the 3 records that we get from this current query. One small thing that I wanted to show you is, okay, for this demo, I have created another data extension called welcome users without key. Without key means I just created this data extension and did not select any primary key. Right. So this is an example like wherein you have a data extension without any primary key. And all I wanted to show you here is that if you select such a data extension, then you won't be able to select update option. Why? Because there's no primary key selected. So it won't know how is the data to be updated in that data extension. Right? If you select one of the fields as primary key, then it knows that it needs to look for that field, see if a record exists, see if a match is found, and update that record. So this one does not have a key, so it won't know how it should look for existing matching record and update that, right? So just in case if I try to select update and go to next, yeah, I will get an error. Target data extension must have at least one primary key field, right? So then I need to go back and select the other data extension. This one hopefully has primary key, yes, and it allowed to save it without any error. So yeah, I'm not running the query, but yeah, it's straightforward. If you run the query, the output you will get in this data extension. Test welcome S. Yeah, test welcome S. And you'll get the 3 records. Right. So that is query activity. And you can also write complex queries wherein you can join this with any other data extension or with data views, which will also be covered in one of the subsequent sessions. So, right, you can have multiple source data extensions, I'm sorry, which can be joined or which can be processed, combined, aggregated, whatever you want to do using your SQL query. And the target data extension will have the data from this query activity. Next, send email activity. Pretty straightforward. If you want to send an email, single email via your automation studio, then you can use send email activity. So yeah, the data extension should be a sendable data extension or a subscriber list, and you can schedule this automation so that the email that will be sent out will be sent on the particular date and time that you have configured in this automation. Yeah, so I just create a sample activity and show you. I think it should be straightforward. So you create a new activity, you select the email that you have already configured in content builder. I'll select an email. It'll ask me to enter a name. And then this is very similar to the options that you have in Email Studio. Like you will be asked to select a target data extension, or you can also add an exclusion. in under the excluded and suppressed section. Pretty much similar to Email Studio. And that's it. And you click next and save, and it should be done. So this is send email activity. Similarly, you have send push, send group connect, send SMS. Okay. Next one is script activity. Script activity is used by those developers who want to use scripting, basically server-side Java scripting in their automation. So again, for the purpose of demo, I have a sample script activity which executes a post request, a particular URL, payload, response, result, and then it logs the data into a data extension. So this is nothing but a server-side JavaScript SSJS script code. And using the script activity, you can automate that the script should execute as part of your automation. Right. So again, we have a dedicated session wherein we'll talk about SSJS and scripting in general. So again, I won't go into the details, but yes, just for your understanding, once you have written your SSJS and you have tested it, maybe using a cloud or a custom cloud page, then once that script is ready and you want to include that script within your automation to run again hourly, daily, weekly, as per your automation schedule, or even it could be a file drop automation, then you can have a script activity. Okay, then next one is verification activity. So verification activity, what it does is it checks a data extension. So for data extension, if some condition, then take some action. So this is what verification activity does. So maybe I'll quickly create a verification activity and show you. Configure. Yeah. So let's say, okay. So here there is an option, show data extensions that are used somewhere in this automation, or show all data extensions. Right. So if I select all data extension, I can select this data extension. And then, so going back, what this data extension does is for a data extension, if some condition, then take some action. So basically, verification activity is used to verify if the data extension meets a certain criteria. So if you have an automation, which is like a series of 5 or 10 steps, and there are certain steps which you want to execute only if the data or the number of rows in your data extension has got a certain count. So I want to say, let's say the count is greater than 10. Right. So what it does is basically for the data extension called welcome users, if count is greater than 10, then the actions that you can take are either stop the automation or send an email notification. Right. So like, let's say if the count is equal to 0, let's say there are certain steps in your automation which you only want to execute if the count of rows is non-zero. So if there are non-zero records, then you want to maybe export that or export that to FTP or call an API, call a script, execute some SQL, any of those activities. But before executing that activity, you want to check the number of records in that data extension, then you can use a verify data, verify query activity, verification activity. I'm sorry. Right. So welcome users. If count is equal to 0, then you have an option to stop the automation. In that case, if I select stop the automation, this is a summary here. And let's say if I have another send email activity here, 5.1, and if this condition satisfies, then the automation will stop here and it won't execute 5.1, 6.1 or all the automation steps after this particular step. Yeah, that is why I think you would have noticed that it won't allow you to place this activity in any other step besides any other activity. It has to be in a dedicated step, right? Only then it will make sense that let the automation run till step 1, 2, and 3, and then check and then run step 5 onwards, right? If you placed it here, then again it isn't sure whether activity step 3 should run or not, right? So that is why it has to be in a dedicated step. Okay, so that is verification activity. So I think with this, I have covered all the major activities that we use most of the times for most of our use cases. Yeah, and these are the activities that even I have used in most of the automations that I've built, but there are others as well which I have not covered in the session today. But yeah, you can check the help center article for those activities on how to use them, how to configure them. But these yeah, maybe they are somewhat similar, not similar, yeah, but like we've covered send email, but send push, send group connect, send SMS, I think self-explanatory. Wait is like adding sort of a delay in your activity. So let's say you want to execute step 1 and then wait for 1 hour, 2 hours or something like that, then you can add a wait activity. Yeah, so I think with this we have covered the activities section. Okay, now moving on to the next section, which is automation controls. So at an automation level, I have been using these options, run once, save, but just to go into the details of what all options are available. So okay, let me go back to the automation that we configured yesterday. Inbound, right? So this is an automation that we configured yesterday. Right now it shows that it is in active state. So an automation can be in an active state or an inactive state. When it is in active state, that means the automation is running and it will do whatever it is supposed to do, as in trigger based on the trigger criteria that is configured and also run the individual activities across all the steps. So this is active state. So that means if I drop a file in the FTP and this location, then this automation will trigger right now. But let's say if I want to stop this automation, I don't want to run it. I don't want it to run anymore. Then I can select deactivate now, and click on save. So this automation becomes inactive. Right. So if you go back and again check, sorry, demo. Yeah, come back to this automation and you'll find that it is in inactive state. If you want to activate again, simple, click on activate now, save. Right. So those are the two options, activate and inactivate. Yeah. Another option that is available is to stop an activity that you will see when an activity is running. So let me go back to our activity. Okay, let me run this activity under run once mode. Yeah, I need to delete the activities that are not configured. Only then run once will be enabled. Yes, so run once. Click on this, run. Okay. Now, if I go to activity tab, I will see an option to stop this. So if I use this option, then I'm able to stop an automation. Right, and then okay, let's say if I configure this automation, yeah, then for a scheduled automation, you can either make it active, or make it, or put it in pause state. For a file drop automation, we already saw it was active and inactive. Yes. So just to confirm. Go to demo inbound. Yeah. So scheduled automation, the options are active and paused. File drop, the option is active and inactive. But pause and inactive, I would say are same. Right. So in terms of automation control, yes, you have these options: active, inactive, stop, pause, and of course, edit. You can edit the schedule, you can edit the activities. These are the two additional options: copy and delete. So if you want to make a copy of this automation along with all the steps that are included in this, you can select copy, or if you want to delete an automation, you can select delete. Right. So those are the different controls that we have in Automation Studio to interact with our automation basically. Okay. Automation Studio errors. So when you're running the automation, when you have configured the automation, you might see different error messages in the automation activity tab. So this automation has run successfully, so you see it green colored, but sometimes you'll, if there is some error that is thrown, then you'll see those activities with an error message and a red colored icon. So this article shows what are the different error text that you can see, what is the meaning and what is the suggested action. So timeout means if the query has timed out, the query took too long to run. Yeah, there are different scenarios, so different activities will have different errors, different types of errors. So this article, you can bookmark this. It would be very helpful if you come across any particular error and you want to understand how to fix this error. Import file activity errors, filter activity errors, send email activity errors, so on. Right. So this is about Automation Studio errors. Then we have automation status. So yeah, where do you see this automation status? Yeah. So this overview page wherein you see a list of all the automations, you can filter your automation by status. So you want to view all the automations which are in ready state, running state, scheduled state, pause, active, inactive, right? So if you want to understand what are the different status values possible, then this is the table that you can refer to. I think the name is by the name, looking at the name of the status, you should already get some idea. It is straightforward. Running, pause, stop, schedule, awaiting trigger, inactive, skipped if the automation was skipped, rerun the automation if needed. That's it, suggested action. Right, so those are the different automation status. Okay. Automatically deactivated automations. So an automation, which is this entire automation that you have created, for example, demo inbound. If this automation fails at least 30 times and has a 100% failure rate for at least 30 days. So when it meets both these criteria, then Marketing Cloud automatically deactivates this automations and this automation won't run after this. So all the future schedules that have been configured for this automation, those will be ignored and the automation will not run. The schedule as well as the file drops. So even if a file is dropped in the FTP matching the pattern or whatever is the configuration for that automation, even if the trigger criteria is satisfied, but the automation will not run. Under which criteria? If the automation fails at least 30 times and has a 100% failure rate for at least 30 days. Once you fix the automation, you can go back to the workflow tab for that automation, select activate and reactivate the automation. And this is the last and important slide. This I mentioned in yesterday's session, and I think it's better to repeat this. You always need to ensure that you configure email addresses, specifically the runtime error email addresses, to receive notifications for the automations. Because once you have configured the automation and it would run on a specific schedule on a specific interval, then you are not going to come back here and see what's the status, whether it is running, is this failing or not. So it is very important to use this notification setting option and configure an email address so that you get an email alert whenever there is an error or whenever your automation fails. Right. So when you receive an alert, when you receive an email notification, you can come back to this automation, check the error message. What is the error message here? Refer to this article, find out what's the meaning, take the suggested action, fix it, reactivate the automation, and it should be up and running. So yeah, with this, yes, I can say that we've concluded the automation studio session, day 2. Okay, so if anybody has got any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. This is an example for refresh groups automation. Lakshmi, we covered the filter activity. Sorry. Yeah, we covered filter activity. And Lakshmi, I remember yesterday you had asked a question that if you want to consider only last 24 hours data in your automation, then yes, then I think you have the answer today. You can either use a filter activity to filter out the record from last 24 hours, or you can use a query activity to again basically use SQL and filter out the records from last 24 hours and then let it process or let the rest of the automation activities process the data. Okay, next slide. And also encrypt and decrypt the data. Safe house. So as I mentioned yesterday, it is like an internal system data storage space, I would say, which so yeah, if as we see in this sample, inbound and outbound file transfer activity, if there is a requirement to decrypt the data or unzip the data where the file that is uploaded to FTP is encrypted or zipped, then in that case, there is an intermediate step which is called safe house, where marketing cloud, in case of inbound, brings the data from FTP first into safe house where you can unzip or decrypt, and then from there you can pass on the data to marketing cloud, right? So this is like a temporary file storage area, but is not accessible like you are able to access the FTP using FileZilla. This you cannot access, but using an activity like a file transfer activity has got access to safe house, and using that you can move the data from FTP to safe house or safe house to FTP. List can be used as a source in automation, whereas it's not possible in journey builder. Am I correct? List can be used as a source in automation, whereas it's not possible in journey builder. Lakshmi, are you referring to, sorry, which specific activity in Automation Studio are you referring to? So, like within an automation studio, a specific activity, for example, the filter activity that we saw here. Sorry. You are able to use list. Sorry, filtered. Okay, I think that will depend on the data filter that you have configured. So when I'm creating a data filter, here I can either select a profile attribute from a list or a field from a data extension. So if I'm using profile attribute, then that means I'm using a list. Okay, I see your question. No, Vishal, starting element is schedule file drop. Sorry for the confusion. Okay, I think the question is answered already, maybe. But if not, feel free to drop in a follow-up question in the chat. But yeah, I think within the automation studio, depending on the activity that you are using, you might, while using that activity, be able to access data inside a list or in a data extension. That depends on the capabilities of the activity. And if the question is regarding the starting source, then yes, starting source can be just a schedule or a file drop or a trigger. So yeah, okay, I think it is clarified. Any other question? Anybody has any other question? No? Okay. If not, then maybe I will stop the recording and then we can have the quiz session.